we move on to the next chapter called cross-keying. And cross-keying is patently an advanced topic when it comes to the science of how to do it. But we're just going to talk about it a little bit just to make you aware of what it is and how, if you're in a position where someone's asking for it, to allow you to understand the concept in the sense of being familiar with it, saying, I've heard about that, I'm reasonably familiar with what it is, and that you can choose to dive in deeper to it should there be a reason to do so. Maybe you might contact a locksmith that you know, or participation in a LOA, etc. So cross-keying, there are two types of cross-keying, and basically it's when two different keys operate a cylinder and you don't expect that those keys would operate that cylinder. Or maybe you would. Whatever the case might be, there are multiple keys. There's more than one key in the same level that operates a cylinder. Cross-keying is not change key, master key, grandmaster key. It's just different change keys that will work a cylinder. And there's many legitimate reasons to do this. Cross-keying is just like what we talked about, Meson keying, controlled cross-keying. That's what that is. The rule, there is a very stern rule when it comes to that, and we actually touched on it a little bit earlier, where the different change keys that will operate that one cylinder, and if you recall back just to the chapter we were in, we had different biddings that operated the common doors, the doors that were common in the apartment building. Well, the way that was written so that it was done correctly is that the individual change keys were only different from its master key that they're under in one position. So what that means is, in one chamber only, the cut will be different. You wouldn't have two chambers or more than one where the cuts are different than the other keys. So I feel like I'm botching this. If your master key is 32322, 32322, let's say your change keys are 54544, 54546, 54548. Those three change keys can be safely cross-keyed into a cylinder because 44, 46, and 48, it's only the fifth column in a 5-pin cylinder. It's only the fifth column that is changing. Each one of those change keys is only different from the master key in one chamber or position. Okay. You can obviously start to say to yourself, well, what if I needed 20 keys to work in a cylinder? Well, that's going to take a dive into the world of locksmithing pretty deeply. But understand it's going to require substantial review to determine feasibility based on what you're actually doing. Now, there are two types of cross-keying, and they're awful terms. I mean, I only know what they mean because I've had to stare at the definition so many times and study how it's done. There's controlled cross-keying and uncontrolled cross-keying. They don't really mean what you think, well, maybe they do, but especially uncontrolled. It doesn't mean what you think. Uncontrolled, oh my gosh, there's a rogue key. There's, Panic at the Disco problems. There's no unplanned facet to uncontrolled cross-keying. Nothing is done without a plan. They use a term uncontrolled, making it seem, oh boy, we got a problem. Maybe you think it's interchange. Oh, we've got interchange happening. The difference is this, and you'll want to take note of this if you are studying for the AHC exam. Controlled cross-keying is when you have different change keys working a cylinder under the same master key. Uncontrolled cross-keying is when you have different change keys working under more than one master key. And the approach to each of those is different in the respect that you have to handle the condition differently. But it does require a deep dive into master keying theory when it comes to cross-controlled and uncontrolled just know that it's a delicate situation when you have multiple masters involved in your cross-keying. And when you are cross-keying which is uncontrolled, and when you're cross-keying in a controlled fashion, the size of that system could be relatively small because of that maxim that you can only be different in one position. So there will be finite rules to it. Let's switch to the screen view and let's just knock out this chapter. It's short, it won't take very long. Let's see if we can reasonably decode part of cross-keying without making it any muddier. Cross-keying is when you have more than one change key operating a cylinder and is best considered only at the outset of designing a key system. That's true because when you create your standard progression format and you're assigning keys, you may not have the ability to extract out of the standard progression format a group of keys that will work compatibly with each other in a cross-keyed scenario. I will provide a basic outline of how to handle this, but cross-keying to deploy correctly, safely, and without key interchange is through and through an advanced topic. Cross-keying is defined as controlled when the different keys you are desiring to operate the cylinder are under the same master, and uncontrolled cross-keying and is uncontrolled cross-keying when the different keys you are desiring to operate the cylinder are under a different master. You could have 1AA, 2AA, and then you could have 1AB and 2AB. And all four of those keys will need to be cross-keyed. It's uncontrolled because there's two different masters. There's the AA and the AB. That's the only difference. There's no runaway event of cataclysmic occurrences happening when the word uncontrolled is used. And in this document, there is certainly at least one link to a list council, the list council definition of terms. I would just simply suggest that you read that because it's been written by a group of locksmiths who have all agreed, I would imagine by majority, that that is how the definition should be. So uncontrolled, when you have different keys you are desiring to operate the cylinder are under a different master. Great. To be technical for a moment, successful cross-keying needs to adhere to the requirement where there is a one-pin incidental master that all of your different keys are under. And what that means is, in order for it to work, there does have to be the existence of of this one-pin incidental master. And that's going to be where you have one chamber that's going to be in common with those keys. Secondly, the different keys that you want to pass the cylinder need to be almost identical but vary only by a single cut in only one chamber. Finally, you must be adding extra master pins in one chamber only. If you violate any of these three rules when combinating these cylinders, it's likely that you will have unintentional incidental keys operating the cylinders. Lastly, it is to be understood, once you have programmed cross-keying into a keying system, it is difficult to evolve or maintain or modify the system because you will have master pins in chambers in your cylinder. And when you pull out one master pin to prevent a key from working in that cylinder, you will very likely prevent other keys from working in that cylinder, which you would desire to be allowed to continue to work in that cylinder. So what all that means is you can cross-key, but it's going to severely limit your ability to work the system in the future. So if it's a tiny system, you're not going to have really much trouble. But the counter-argument to any cross-keying is just assign another key for that lock. And as Lloyd said, the magic of the invention of the key ring, however he put that, through the amazing invention of the key ring, I just get a kick out of, because I remember him saying it, seeing him say it, through the amazing invention of the key ring, So, it's going to be difficult to mold that system down the road, possibly. Most definitely without an absolute master on the subject matter. So, conversely, if you want to add a key into that system and you need to add a master pin, you are very likely going to be certainly introducing incidental keys into the system as well. The primary paralyzing fear when it comes to people proceeding with cross-keying is, when done incorrectly, you will have unintentional keys working the cylinder. And that's really where the advanced skill set comes in, meaning when it comes to preventing that sort of unintentional cross-keying from happening in the first place. Very early in my career, I've relayed this story, I incorrectly cross-keyed an apartment building where Unit 1 operated 4, and which operated 7, and thankfully the landlord caught the mistake when he was installing the hardware prior to occupancy. And to add one other thing to that story, I said to myself, what made that guy check those other keys? What made him try key 1 into all the other doors? And I never asked him because I was too thoroughly shocked, embarrassed, and bruised in my ego. But I'm very grateful that he did, because I didn't. And I'm very happy that he did. The client was not happy, though I believe it was far harder on my ego than it was on the client. That's my attempt to be humorous. There's nothing humorous about this. It was a tough lesson to learn. To have to come back to the shop, but I was able to learn from my mistake immediately, and realizing what I did wrong, I was able to recombinate the cylinders and guarantee that I understood the skill necessary to do it correctly. That actually happened. This could have gone far worse had occupancy occurred. Don't play with cross-keying unless you're extremely lucky like I was. The Aloha List Council dictionary defines cross-keying in both iterations, which frankly we have just done so. If you have a client who wants different change keys to operate a cylinder, you will either need to learn this advanced skill or rely on the factory for guidance and direction. I suggest the latter because locksmithing is the brain. Learning locksmithing is a muscle. If you don't exercise it often, you'll notice that you have lost some of the skill, the mental grasp of it. I know that it happens to me, and I revisit it semi-regularly to refresh. But there are other things that I let go because I know I can go back and relearn it, and I don't have to walk around on a daily basis with the ability to whip out a standard progression format and show you unintentional cross-keying, at the drop of a pin. Locksmiths who engage in key work 5 days a week, or perhaps a university lock shop, and the like will need this skill set, but you as a door and hardware distributor can stop short of possessing the skill. That's my opinion. If you decide to dive in, membership and active participation in LOA and the educational opportunities that would be available to you is the best way to do this. That's the bottom line. Next is master key system and maintenance. Let's pause this video and wrap up cross-keying on camera. So that's cross-keying. I think everyone will eventually get a request to have locks and cylinders work that way. I would probably suggest that if you want to try to understand it in your head in the job process, that you very likely pick up a book by a true expert. Jerome Andrews, Billy B. Edwards, and many, many, many others. Those are just the ones that I go back to often. And I think through the process of me studying for the Aloha CRL and then the PRP test that allowed me to to achieve the CPL, and then the larger mandatory test for the institutional certified professional locksmith, I couldn't get my hands around the quantity of locksmithing books that I was referring to. And as a result of having about 80 in my library, I know which ones I go back to. And why I go back to them. So those are the ones that are at the top of my head. And my exposure to the greater world of expert locksmiths as authors is quite limited. And it only goes back so many years, so there could very likely be exceptional resources that I just haven't encountered yet. Let's move on to master key system and maintenance.